Estamos de vuelta, cierre de Wall Street, enseguida le echamos un vistazo a los mercados, vemos cómo cierra. Antes nos trasladamos hasta este nuevo evento que ha montado, como ven, en una fábrica Joe Biden para hablar de empleo, y en vez de él está haciéndolo uno de los que ha encontrado empleo gracias a las políticas demócratas. Todo perfectamente montado. Vamos hasta allí en todo caso, escuchamos y enseguida vemos también qué dice el propio presidente Biden sobre esa inversión disparando el empleo, y les contamos también lo que está pasando, lo último sobre la parte en la que se va a elevar el techo de deuda. Ahí tienen a Joe Biden hoy. Bueno, el montaje es fantástico, no dirán que no. Es fantástico el montaje. Joe Biden llegando a ese estrado, llegando a ese, bueno, a ese Invest in America, otro de esos eventos que monta el propio presidente del Ejecutivo norteamericano para hablar en este caso de empleo, para darse esos baños de masas particulares en los que, por cierto, ya les digo, no hay ruedas de prensa, no hay preguntas. Pero bueno, vamos a ver qué dice. Escuchamos también hasta qué punto está haciéndole o puede hacerle daño a Europa la Inflation Reduction Act y cómo está relacionándose todo esto con ese crecimiento del empleo en Estados Unidos. Vamos con Joe Biden.
The press wrote he's just so dumb he didn't even know there were no seats. Anyway, I'm glad you have seats to sit in because you've been standing a long time. Folks, I want to thank Brandon for that introduction. And Mayor Scott Lund, thank you for the passport into the city. I promise I'll not abuse it. And the mayors of the Twin Cities are here as well. Jacob Fry from Minneapolis, where are you, Jacob? He was here. I guess he knew I was going to speak. And Melvin Carter, St. Paul. Look, thank you for joining us. And Governor Walsh, you and I have been working together for a while, man. You're the champion for Minnesota. You really are. Thank you for being here today. And thank you for your friendship. Minnesota's two outstanding senators, Amy Klobuchar, who is, by the way, in the Biden family, there's no woman as old as any man. So I think I know she has to be 30 to be a senator, but an incredible partner to me, and who successfully helped lead the fight to lower the price of prescription drugs, which is a gigantic accomplishment. Together with Tina Smith, your other great senator, they work every day to reduce the cost to American families, safeguard basic rights, and bring manufacturing jobs back to Minnesota. You know, Congresswoman Omar, I want to thank you for being here.
Bueno, de momento hablando del sector manufacturero, de cómo está creciendo, del impulso que está pegándole, bueno, no deja de ser curioso que lo haga en un día en el que el ISM muestra el quinto mes de contracción y el menor, o la mayor caída si quieren, pero vamos, su menor nivel en los últimos 5 meses. ¿Qué sé yo? ¿La economía va bien? Si se le pregunta a Joe Biden, la economía va a ir a mal si se le pregunta a Jerome Powell, de la Reserva Federal. Pero la realidad es que el sector manufacturero no va tan bien como dice Joe Biden, aunque eso sí, de momento ensalzando esa construcción, diciendo, bueno, que van a impulsar el trabajo en determinadas regiones. Ha saludado también al gobernador de la zona. En fin, está en eso Joe Biden. Vamos a ver si dice algo más, sobre todo si comienza a dar también algunos datos económicos.
Advocate for making prescription drugs and everyday cost affordable for all of you people out there. And, you know, I want to thank Tony and everyone at Cummins to celebrate the investment you're making in clean energy manufacturing, good paying jobs, and American innovation. You know, I've asked most of the CEOs that I've come in contact with, and most of them I've met in the Fortune 500, and I asked them a question repeatedly. When the United States government makes considerable resources available for new industries, what does that do to businesses? Does it dissuade them or encourage them? And the answer every single time is it encourages them to get into business. It encourages investment. Federal investment attracts private investment. It creates jobs and industries, and it demonstrates we're all in this together. And that's what today's all about. I'm here to talk about what we're doing to invest in America, invest in Minnesota, and the progress we've made in building an economy from the middle out and the bottom up. Because when it comes from the top down, my dad's kitchen table, not much dropped on that kitchen table from the top down. But when you build it the other way, everyone does well, and the wealthy do very well as well. So you don't have to worry about them. We're not hurting anybody. The progress we've made creating strong, sustainable economic growth has been real. We passed the American Rescue Plan, the most aggressive economic recovery since Franklin Delano Roosevelt. We passed the bipartisan infrastructure law, the most substantial investment since President Eisenhower invested in an interstate highway system, bridges, roads, ports, airports, clean water, high-speed internet. And the CHIPS and Science Act, which we didn't get the other team to join very much, but the most significant investment in manufacturing and research and development in American history.
Una de las mayores inversiones en el crecimiento de las manufacturas, de las mayores inversiones en la industria de la historia, precisamente de la industria norteamericana. Eso es lo que dice Joe Biden que está realizando. No es casual, está en una fábrica de componentes, hablando de cómo está impulsando precisamente una transformación, dice, que tiene que ver el mundo entero, hablando de la creación de chips y de cómo esa creación de chips y manufacturas, ese plus industrial de la industria tecnológica tiene que darse en Estados Unidos y que eso genere empleo, no solo en Estados Unidos, sino que va más al foco y habla del lugar donde está, como hace siempre, en Minnesota.
That's more jobs in 2 years. That's more jobs in 2 years than any president's created in 4 years. And it's because of this group sitting right in front of you just heard from. It means we're recovering every single lost job in the pandemic and created 3 million more. Instead of exporting jobs to get cheaper labor costs, that's what we did for decades. We used to lead the world, by the way, in investments. But what we started to do, we started exporting jobs and importing product, generating deficits. Now we're creating American jobs and exporting American products and growing our economy. Since I took office, we've attracted commitments from more than $435 billion in private investment in less than 2 years. An American manufacturing
800.000 empleos en los próximos 2 años dentro de la industria es más de lo que se ha creado en 2 años. Nadie había creado en 2 años tantísimos trabajos y eso es lo que vamos a hacer, dice, y ahora está dando esos anuncios de las distintas infraestructuras, 23.000 trabajadores para infraestructura, 4.500 en... bueno, vamos con él y enseguida relatamos ese despliegue de los 800.000 empleos que creará o dice va a crear en 2 años Joe Biden.
Plus, my economic plan is building more clean energy future made in America. Not in the world, made in America. For example, we're building a network of 500,000 electric vehicle stations by the IBEW all across America. Right here in Minnesota, when you're driving across I-94 or taking I-35 through the Twin Cities, charging stations will be easy to find. As easy as it is to find a gas station today. Folks, we're providing incentives for companies like Cummins to manufacture clean energy technology right here in Minnesota. For over a century, Cummins has built diesel engines and heavy-duty trucks and power generators. For over half of all medium and heavy-duty trucks on the road today have Cummins engines. Well, today you made generators for the Department of Defense for decades, as I walked through and saw them. World War II, 50% of all the diesel and gas generators used by the Allies in the war came from Cummins. When Cummins first manufactured hydrogen electrolyzers, they had to make them overseas. These are the machines that make clean hydrogen, a renewable energy used to power our economy, from clean cars to trucks to steel to cement manufacturing. But now, thanks to the Inflation Reduction Act, with the tax credits for renewable energy, Cummins is going to manufacture these electrolyzers here in America for the first time. And Cummins
habla de cómo la industria de chips lo mueve al mundo, etcétera, etcétera. Se va a trasladar, dice, gracias a la Inflation Reduction Act, gracias a esa ley de reducción de la inflación, que más que tener que ver con la inflación, tiene que ver con el impulso que le quiere dar a la autoproducción en Estados Unidos y al lanzamiento de nuevas tecnologías, de energías limpias. Dice, bueno, por primera vez, todo eso, todas esas manufacturas, todo ese salto energético, tecnológico, potencial que dan esa industria de chips, se va a producir en Estados Unidos. Volvemos hasta allí, volvemos hasta Minnesota.
Already, Cummins has signed contracts for clean hydrogen for producers and utilities in New York, Florida, and Washington State. And it's just beginning, just beginning. Think about what it means for our supply chain and our communities. Before the pandemic, the supply chain wasn't something most Americans spent much time thinking about. But today, after delays for parts and products, everyone knows why supply chains are so important. Instead of relying on equipment made overseas in places like China The supply chains will be again made in America. They'll begin in America. Begin in America. Cummins will build the technology that produces clean hydrogen. Companies and utilities across the country will use those products to make clean hydrogen. And trucks made in America with zero-emission engines will be powered by clean hydrogen. And by the way, that includes Cummins, which just today announced that it will invest over $1 billion at a plant in New York and Indiana and North Carolina to produce low-carbon, zero-emission engines for trucks. And the point here is it's all made in America rather than overseas. It's a game changer. And folks, where is it written that America can't once again be the manufacturing capital of the world? Where is that written? We used to be. Well, we're telling a different story here at Cummins and over at Becker, where Xcel Energy is investing $600 million to build the largest solar farm in the state. Plus, we're building a solar storage facility at that site with innovative batteries made in West Virginia. Since I took office, companies have announced over $2 billion in major manufacturing investments in Minnesota alone, just Minnesota. And we're bringing other key parts of the supply chain back to America, like semiconductors, which you just heard about. These are the small chips, computer chips, about the size of the tip of my little finger, that affect everything in our lives, from our cell phones, automobiles, refrigerators, so much more. America invented these chips. We invented them. We made them smaller, we made them faster, we made them more powerful. But then something happened about 4 or 5 decades ago.
Bueno, ya ha vuelto a esa cantina que debió gustarle en el primer discurso y ahora lo repite en cada uno de estos actos que se parecen mucho a un acto electoral, si me permiten, en esta suerte de inauguraciones. Dice que América inventó los chips y que evidentemente tiene que empezar a hacerlos, que las compañías que haya en todo el mundo, a lo largo de todo el mundo, que se dedican a esto y las más avanzadas son estadounidenses y que sin embargo tienen las fábricas fuera, que ahora lo que van a hacer es traerlas dentro y generar empleo. Si nos siguen, ya han escuchado esto, seguro. En todo caso, vamos con Joe Biden. Seguimos escuchando.
1/3 of the core inflation in the year 2021 was because of the high price of new automobiles. Every new vehicle that's built needs about 3,000 chips per vehicle. During the pandemic, auto companies couldn't get enough chips. Prices went up because cars were in short supply. And companies like Cummins felt the shortage as well. Your CEO told me herself that many of your products do not run without semiconductors. Now we're turning things around in a big way. All over the country, semiconductor countries are investing hundreds of billions of dollars, over $300 billion, a record amount of money to bring chip production back home. In Ohio, and I visited these facilities, in Ohio, I call what I call a field of dreams, 20 miles outside of Columbia. Intel's committed $20 billion to build 3 new fabs there. New York, IBM has committed $20 billion to build chips in Poughkeepsie, New York. And Micron has committed $20 billion to build in Syracuse and is committed, if that goes, to do another $100 billion. In Arizona, TSMC has committed $40 billion. Altogether, these investments are going to create tens of thousands of good-paying jobs. Jobs in both construction and in the operating fabs, the factories. They're about the size of 4 football fields. Jobs that can pay an average of $130,000, this is the average now, $130,000 a year working those fabs. You know the good news is? You don't need a college degree. You don't need a college degree. It matters. Here in Minnesota, Governor Walz and members of his legislature are working to invest $500 million in matching funds for semiconductors and biomanufacturing to go along with our federal investment. Plus, your governor signed a historic law to deliver 100% carbon pollution-free electricity across the state, as one of the senators mentioned, across Minnesota by 2040. By 2040. Hubert Humphrey would be proud. We're working to ensure our clean energy manufacturing future is also one that supports America's working families with good, and I don't make anybody mad, but I make no apology, good union jobs that pay a prevailing wage. Listen. I know many here in Minnesota are watching at home, are like the folks I grew up in Scranton, Pennsylvania, and Claymont, Delaware. You feel left out, left behind in an economy that's rapidly changing. I get it. I get it. But hear me well. We're going to leave no one behind. We're going to make sure all American workers with college degrees, without college degrees, are prepared to compete with anyone in the world in the next remainder of this century. We're working with companies, community colleges, technical schools, union-led registered apprenticeships, training programs to make sure this happens. And in Minnesota, an agricultural powerhouse that has helped feed and fuel the country and the world, I'm working closely with Minnesota members of the House and Senate committees to make sure we get a farm bill passed.
Bueno, hablando de a quién le hace bien y cómo, este plano tampoco es casual. Fíjense con todo el Investing America en Minnesota. Bueno, está hablando de qué le hace bien y, como siempre, cada vez que va a uno de estos sitios, cuál es la repercusión concreta en cada uno de los sectores. Ahora hablando también de esa agricultura, de que se viene también de las granjas y de que eso también puede tener un beneficio importante si se usa bien la tecnología y si se implementan determinadas formas de consumo, porque además, entre otras cosas, también está contemplado en la Inflation Reduction Act, es decir, que también se pueden beneficiar de todo esto. Pero ahí lo tienen, una inversión multimillonaria la que está realizando el gobierno norteamericano. Dice que los fondos federales atraen inversión privada, que eso repercute directamente en la creación de empleo, en la creación de trabajo y por lo tanto también en la riqueza que después se va generando y que por fin se está generando dentro de Estados Unidos. Vuelve a insistir Joe Biden, el presidente estadounidense, en esa idea de que ya está bien de que el trabajo se esté generando fuera, de que el empleo se esté generando fuera cuando las empresas son americanas y cuando el producto que se genera está hecho precisamente para ser consumido ahí, en América. Volvimos con Joe Biden, que debe estar a punto de terminar, y enseguida miramos a los índices americanos con tono mixto a estas horas.
Next time your kid has to do homework online, you don't have to pull up in front of a McDonald's and work off their power. I'm not joking. All these investments mean that now if you grow up in Minnesota, or you go to a school in Minnesota, you can stay in Minnesota. The Midwest is coming back screaming. Good jobs. You can raise a family on. You don't have to hear your son or daughter say, "Mom, I love it here, but there's no work for me. I got to leave." None of this is happening by accident. It's not just happening in Minnesota. It's all part of my agenda to invest in America, American jobs, American innovation, pride in our country. The word my dad most often uses, every worker deserves to be treated with dignity. And their families looking for that as well. Folks, and by the way, we can afford everything I just explained and reduce the deficit by asking, by the way, we have about 1,000 billionaires now in America. You know the average tax rate they pay in taxes? 3%, T-H-R-E-E. You know what paid for all this? You've heard me talk a lot about the fact that there were 55 Fortune 500 companies that made $40 billion, didn't pay a single penny in taxes. We did an awful thing. We're paying 15% now. But it paid for everything.
Directo a los impuestos, en otro claro mensaje que siempre suele mandar. ¿Saben cuánto pagaban las empresas del Fortune 500 en beneficios? Que apenas pagaban un solo penique, decía, en impuestos. Bueno, pues ahora pagan el 15%. Y además, no puede ser, tenemos más de 1.000 millonarios, o mil millonarios, en Estados Unidos. Y que paguen por lo menos, que tampoco es tanto, que paguen y van a pagar el 3%. Y con eso se va a pagar todo ese plan de desarrollo que tiene puesto en la cabeza y que está ya bajando a tierra el propio Joe Biden, con el que pretende crear más de 800.000 puestos de trabajo en los próximos, en este y en el año que viene, en 2 años. Y respecto de todo esto, además, apela a ese lado emocional cuando dice no está bien que quien crezca en una región no pueda quedarse en ella porque no hay trabajo, que la gente de Minnesota, dice, allí donde está dando este discurso, pueda mirar a los ojos a sus padres y no tenga que decir me voy a ir porque no hay empleo, madre, etcétera, etcétera. Se va a ese lado emocional y dice no, se tiene que poder quedar, tiene que confiar en su ciudad, tiene que confiar en su estado, tiene que confiar en este caso en Minnesota y en su país, porque es donde se están produciendo las cosas, es donde va a conseguir empleo y donde va a conseguir también generar su propia riqueza y su propia familia. En esto está Joe Biden en Minnesota.
Of any nation in the world. You're shaking your head no, Jack, but I'm telling you it's true. Any nation in the world will Well, guess what? Down over at the Veterans Department, they can negotiate the prices they're going to pay for the drugs that they're going to supply for our military in need. Because it's a big market. Well, guess what? We've been trying for years and years to make sure that Medicare could negotiate with the drug companies. Well, Medicare finally has the power to negotiate lower drug prices. And with lower drug prices, you know what it's going to do? It's going to save the taxpayers $160 billion a year. Save them. You know why? How many of you know anyone who needs insulin because they have type 1? Well, you were paying, but it'd be $400 to $600 a year, a month for it, depending on where you're from. Now, because of these folks in front of me here, you don't have to pay more than $35. You know why? That's fair for a simple reason. You know how much it costs to make it? The insulin? $10. $10. Been around for 100 years, $10. By the way, there's a couple other provisions there. If your mom or dad, God bless them, are on expensive prescription drugs, and God forbid they get cancer, well, they can pay as much as $14,000 a year for the cancer drugs they need. Not anymore. Beginning in 2025, guess what? All your drugs, you can never have to pay more than $2,000 a year, no matter how much it costs, if you're on Medicare.
Bueno, Joe Biden ya apelando directamente a ese Medicare suyo, a las ayudas económicas que está dando, vuelve a hablar de la insulina, vuelve a hablar del coste del cáncer, dice, si pagas $10 por esos pinchazos de insulina una vez al mes y los tienes que pagar, ¿qué? ¿100 años? Eso es una locura. Pues ¿sabes cuánto vas a pagar ahora? Nada. ¿Por qué? Porque está la administración de Joe Biden detrás. Y lo mismo con el cáncer. No sé si funcionará, no sé si será rentable, lo que habrá que ver, y eso sí será evaluable el próximo año, es si esto da votos. Volvemos hasta Minnesota.
The last guy who had this job, he increased it by $2 trillion deficit. Look, my budget reduces, the budget I've introduced now reduces the deficit by nearly $3 trillion over the next 10 years. But folks, unfortunately, this is not your father's Republican Party. I have gotten, if you no reason why you should know anything about me, but I've gotten on well with my Republican colleagues over the years, for real. Good relationships. But this ain't your father's Republican Party. This is what I call the mega Republicans. The MAGA Republicans in Congress threaten to undo all this progress. They're putting our economy in jeopardy by threatening to refuse to pay America's bills that took 200 years to accumulate now, by the way. Not this year's, last year's, 200 years. They said they're not going to pay the bill, which would, for the first time, America would default on its debt, which would throw us not only in recession, but would be a disaster for the economy internationally. They want to cut taxes, cut more taxes for the very large corporations. They want the power we just gave to Medicare to negotiate lower drug prices. They call it a huge giveaway, and they want to eliminate it. They want to. I mean, you just turn on the television, you hear them talk. Well, turn on some channels like Fox, you'll hear them talk.
Joe Biden siendo muy clarito. El anterior presidente, Donald Trump, dejó una deuda multimillonaria, elevó el techo de deuda de forma multimillonaria. Por eso él no lo quiere ni negociar, porque dice que su plan de reducción de deuda con el aumento de impuestos de 3 trillion, de 3 trillones, 3 billones si lo traducimos al castellano, a lo largo de los próximos 10 años va a dar mejor resultado que rebajar impuestos y seguir elevando la deuda. Que eso es lo que él no quiere. Porque se puede pagar todo esto, dice Joe Biden, y además reducir la deuda si elevamos los impuestos y si cada uno tiene que pagar, en este sentido, lo que tiene que pagar. Así que la propuesta de rebajar impuestos para seguir teniendo una deuda elevada que nunca conseguimos pagar ni queremos pagar y que le dejamos siempre al siguiente, eso se ha terminado. Dice Joe Biden que ahora lo que hay es esa recaudación que servirá para pagar el Medicare, que servirá para pagar tantas y tantas cosas, para pagar este plan también de empleo, y, por supuesto, para pagar, dice, a lo largo de los próximos 10 años, para reducir el déficit. En eso está Joe Biden frente a los republicanos, y en eso está también toda la Casa Blanca, insisto, trayendo o queriendo traer el empleo, a veces adrede, a veces de forma forzada, quiero decir, y otras veces incentivándolo mucho para las empresas norteamericanas, obligándoles a que tengan que tener ese empleo y esa creación de puestos de trabajo en Estados Unidos, y después, evidentemente, montando ese resto del plan económico. 10 de la noche, cerramos, aprovechamos, dejamos un momento a Joe Biden, aprovechamos para cerrar los índices norteamericanos, que como ven, pues algunos están en positivo, como el S&P 500, subidas del 0,37% para un S&P que se ha ido por encima de los 4.100 puntos en la jornada de hoy, 4.124, 4.126, en esa línea anda el S&P, el Nasdaq 100 intentando, o ha conseguido, no caer tanto como parecía, en este entorno del medio punto porcentual. Ahora hemos visto una caída más ligera del Nasdaq, en el entorno del 0,3, en las caídas que vemos hasta los 12.189, en ese entorno, insisto, 12.189 puntos en ese entorno está el Nasdaq 100, y el Dow Jones subidas de un punto porcentual, un Dow Jones que vemos, insisto, ahí lo tienen, casi un punto porcentual, por encima de los 33.600 puntos. En esa línea se ha llegado a quedar ese índice norteamericano. Ya saben que esta es una semana rara, jornada extraña en cuanto a la programación y a las fórmulas en España. Volveremos evidentemente con todos los análisis de cierre a partir del lunes que viene, pero les iremos contando toda la actualidad y resumiendo lo que ocurre en los mercados también a lo largo de esta semana, porque no sabemos hacerlo de otra manera aquí, en Negocios Televisión.